The American presidents were people, like you and like me, or at least that's how the founders intended them to be. Hi, I'm Teddy Ebby. Welcome back to my original series where we're talking about the nicknames of the U.S. presidents, historical U.S. presidents. We've talked about Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and now we're on to number 4, James Madison. And we're going to talk today about his positive nicknames, things that he's known for in history, or things that people would have called him if they liked him, friends, admirers, the like. We're going to start out with an easy one, Father of the Constitution. This one is kind of a no-brainer. After the Articles of Confederation, the first documents to govern the United States, after they failed, James Madison was a key member of the Constitutional Convention, deciding on the specifics of the Constitution which would eventually come to shape our nation. But there's a little bit more to it than that. Madison came to Philadelphia, to the Constitutional Convention, with plans in mind. He was a strong proponent of the Virginia Plan, something that would eventually push the Constitution through deadlock. He and his political allies built a blueprint that would create a federal government that was strong and centralized, but not overly so. On his own, he is a huge person that we have to thank for the checks and balances that keep the modern United States government in check. Not only that, but during the Constitutional Convention, he took exhaustive notes, writing about what was being said in the room where it happened. So all in all, he had a huge hand in the writing of the Constitution and even later wrote the Federalist Papers in order to help to defend the document against political disagreements. The second nickname is even more interesting. He was also known to his friends as Little Jemmy. Now you would think that this was built out of a negative nickname, and that is somewhat true. Madison's enemies would also seize upon this nickname, but a majority of it was used positively. This is because James Madison was small. He was lightly built and only 5'4", but compared to both the political and statuesque giants of the day, like Washington and Jefferson both standing over 6 feet tall, and John Adams being such a firebrand that it made up for any shortness on his part, friends and allies used this nickname affectionately to emphasize his quiet brilliance. You see, Madison might have been bookish and soft-spoken, but he wielded enormous political clout behind the scenes. It was his friends, allies, and later historians who would recognize this and use that nickname of Little Jemmy. And last but not least, he's also known as the father of political parties. It's a commonly touted fact that in his farewell address, George Washington advised against the creation of political parties. There's a little bit more nuance to this, but James Madison was integral in the creation of the first political parties in the United States. So initially, with the Articles of Confederation in tatters, and the United States of America, born from 13 colonies, now on the brink of another revolution, Madison worked with Federalists like Hamilton and Adams to push the Constitution through. But the Constitution wasn't enough for Hamilton and his Federalist allies. Has never been satisfied. And Madison began to push back against initiatives like the formation of the National Bank. And that led him to ally himself with Thomas Jefferson and form a coalition to fight against a coalition that would eventually become political parties. These were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, or the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. These arguments of a government that is big or small, centralized or localized, rural and agrarian or urban and city-like, have pervaded U.S. politics ever since, for over 200 years.
Are you a Democrat or Republican up there?
So you can see that James Madison thoroughly deserves the title of the father of political parties. I'm Teddy Ebby. These have been the 3 most positive nicknames for the United States' 4th president, James Madison. Join me next time when we talk about his 3 most common negative nicknames, insults specific to him.